How much do lungs really heal after someone quits smoking? Look, it's a really interesting question to consider because quitting smoking is, of course, positive. It's a positive intention to have. All right. And I think it's important to understand that your body, by and large, can heal itself in very, very large degree from quitting smoking. Within 21 days, for example, the risk of heart attack is reduced. Um, and within a month, the cilia in the lungs can start to regrow. Okay. But the longer you go on smoking, the more challenging it is for your body to recover from that. There is a certain point, of course, we call this death, where there is really no chance of coming back from that. And there is a certain point as well where scarring in the lungs can cause challenges later on in life. But you can certainly stop the rot and you can get many, many other benefits by quitting. All right. The sense of well-being you're going to feel, the energy you're going to feel, the sense of being able to get more oxygen in your body so you can walk more, you can exercise more, the sense of personal pride you're going to get from having made this change should not be underestimated. But it is important to consider what will happen if you don't quit, so that you understand that the sooner you make this change, really the better for you. Okay. Because look, your lungs are really, really important, of course, because that's where respiration happens. They are the organ through which we absorb the oxygen inside our body. Now, when a smoker smokes, they irritate and they inflame lung tissue. Okay. So this aggravates mucus production in the lungs. Okay. So smoking actually kills off the tiny hairs in your on your lungs. Okay. The what are called the cilia. Okay. So the cilia's function is to remove mucus. Okay. If you kill off cilia, well, that's why a lot of smokers develop mucus. That's why they develop these smokers' coughs. Okay. So the smoke's coming in, the mucus related to smoking is just building up and building up because there's less of the cilia. Okay. The good news is within a year of quitting, lung function returns to almost where it was previously within a year. Okay. The cilia can become fully functional again and they can start to clear mucus out. Okay. Much, much more efficiently. So there may be potentially a period of clearing out. Okay, so there's also evidence that as this goes through, as this process happens, as we've mentioned, that you can exercise more. Okay, so people who quit smoking, non-smokers, who were previous smokers, well, they're able to perform things better. They're able to perform cardiovascular activities at a better level. Why? Because the ability to breathe and get more oxygen inside them is vastly improved. Okay. Now, so that's all the positive. All right. And hopefully that should move you in that direction. Okay. Now, of course, there's some people who say, well, why bother? The damage is done. Well, look, we've already seen the clear benefits that you're going to get from quitting smoking. From stopping smoking, from quitting smoking, there are huge benefits that start almost immediately. Risk of heart attack reduced within the first month, and then all these other benefits over the next year that will happen. However, for somebody who smoked for a long time, they have irritated that lung tissue. Okay. And it can cause scarring in the lungs. Now you can have what's called light scarring or heavy scarring. Okay. For people have had a very long history of smoking, the heavy scarring is, look, it's where the lungs have really had to work double time, basically. Okay. The lung tissues become very kind of thick and stiff. Okay. Because they're constantly having to work over time to take in to take in oxygen, and if you take in air, and if you think about it, that the kind of stereotype of the smoker wheezing and coughing is because of this. All right, the cilia are damaged, the lungs are having to work overtime, and it can cause this kind of scarring. Okay, where the lung tissue becomes much thicker. Okay, and that, by the way, of course, causes a person to feel tired. Okay, so shortness of breath, if you're not getting enough oxygen in, well, your brain, your body's organs, your blood, nothing can function in the optimum way. All right, there's no way you can engage with cardiovascular exercise with that happening. Okay, so there can be some scarring that occurs, and light scarring can have a very kind of really, a person can carry on their life with very, very little consequence after they've quit. Heavy smoking will continue, or so rather heavy scarring can continue to exert an influence on that person, but they will still get all the other benefits. It's just that the longer they wait, and the more scarring there is, the more of an impact that will have on them. Okay, now we've mentioned that the cilia, the hairs on the lungs that are responsible for removing mucus, can recover, and they can recover within this first year of quitting smoking. That's the good news. On the negative side, smoking destroys the alveoli in the lungs. Okay, so if you remember from your biology at school, alveoli are these tiny sacs, these tiny little sacs within the lungs that help exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide. Okay, so there are something in the region of 500 million alveoli in the body. These alveoli do not grow again. They're not kind of somehow built again after they've been destroyed. All right, so heavy smoking can kill a lot of these alveoli. All right, they can kill hundreds of thousands of them, 1 million of them. So whether or not a person quits, if enough alveoli have been destroyed, that's where people can develop emphysema. So in our family, my grandfather smoked very heavily right the way through his life, and he developed emphysema later on. Okay, so at least at the current stage of medicine and our knowledge, it's it's essentially incurable. There's this coughing, this excess, what they call sputum production, with a lot of tiredness as a result of this. Okay, there's sleep problems. Ultimately, there's heart complications. Okay, and eventually death. I mean, it can go on a very, very long time, but really severe emphysema is a real big problem, particularly pulmonary emphysema. Okay, so that there's still going to be other benefits, but really, if you leave it too long, there's heavy scarring, and you get the pulmonary emphysema. That is something where it's very hard for the body to recover from. Okay, now back to some good news. All right, within 10 years of quitting smoking, lung cancer risk is cut in half compared with the risk of getting lung cancer that a smoker would have. All right, so 2 people who are smoking, one quits. Okay, 10 years down the road, their risk of getting cancer, lung cancer, is half that of the person who carried on smoking. All right, so this is really good news. It's also, according to John Hopkins medicine, people who quit smoking after they get a diagnosis of cancer, their risk of dying, their risk of mortality is reduced by 40%. Okay, so a quitter's smoking, if you quit smoking, you reduce your risk of lung cancer from what it was by 50% within 10 years. And also, if you have cancer or a family member does, and they quit smoking, they reduce their risk of dying. They reduce that risk of mortality by 40%. That's really, really good news. Okay. Now, if you quit smoking, really ideally, and you've been smoking a long time, it's generally recommended that they do have lung cancer screening, basically have that annually. That's what a lot of medical professionals, and of course, medical professionals can guide you on this. Your registered medical professionals, the only person that can advise on this. But for the next 10 years, typically it's worthwhile checking just to make sure that everything's okay. All right. So lung tissue can regenerate. Those cilia cells can regenerate, but you're not going to go back to exactly the kind of condition that you would have had if you didn't smoke. Okay. The worst case scenario is sort of emphysema, or I guess death is the worst case scenario if you carried on smoking, right? But if you stop smoking, emphysema and those kind of things are the sort of challenges that are most likely to be there for somebody who has heavy scarring and where they've killed a lot of the alveoli. Okay. The reality is, for most people who quit, the scarring that is there is very, very light. The cilia grow back. It's minor, the impact on the alveoli, and really the benefit that they get, the overwhelming sense of well-being and energy that they get from being able to change is just it's almost magical for them, because they feel more confident. They feel like they can really take on more things in their life. They can recognize they've got more energy to do stuff. A lot of them throw themselves into exercise. Some of them even start doing running, marathons, or become triathletes, or they just enjoy being with their children. They enjoy the extra money that they have. They enjoy the sense of well-being that they're having. So this is the beauty of quitting. All right. So while it's fair to say, if you're thinking about lungs, how much do lungs really heal after someone quits smoking? It's important just to bear in mind that there are so many benefits psychologically, mentally, and physically, like the reduced risk of heart attacks and strokes, all these kind of things. And over time, progressively more benefits in terms of risks of lung cancer, for example, that it really should be a no-brainer to make a decision sooner rather than later to make this change. All right. But remember, there are these 4 stages that people will go through to quitting smoking. All right. Number 1 is contemplation. That's where you reflect. Would I have made this decision back then when I started, knowing what I know now? Would I still choose to smoke? Another way to say this is, am I glad I did that back then? Am I glad I started this? So you can start to contemplate and get to this point of enough is enough. So you can move to that second stage of preparation, where you enhance your motivation and flush out the things that are of concern to you, the real concerns you have about being able to quit. How are you going to manage your life? What's it going to impact? What's the impact going to be on your family and friends, on your mental well-being? How are you going to still have good mental health when you're quitting and leaving behind this emotional crutch of smoking? And then finding a resilient, robust approach to quitting. Of course, I recommend that seeing a stop smoking expert, but finding the route that works for you, that can be quick and efficient, so you can quit quickly in one go with no cravings. And then this maintenance, this mindful kind of awareness of checking in and noticing throughout the day that you just don't have cravings anymore. You just don't desire it. Okay. And then you'll really appreciate that, yes, the lungs can heal after 40 years of smoking. I mean, lungs can heal to a certain degree. It just depends on the degree of smoking, whether there have been any gaps during that time. And what scarring and what's happened to the alveoli. But even with that knowledge, you know that there's so many benefits that it's the way to go, right? Because you certainly don't want to be compounding something that's and making it worse. You want to be on that point where you feel positive that you've done that. You get all the gains that you can do, and then whatever's left over from that needs to be managed can be managed, but it'll be a lot better managed when you make that decision to quit smoking.